And old flame stirs up painful memories for Hayward in the bill in half an hour. First, we go round the coast with Paul Heiney.
Hello. One ticket, please.
Thank you.
Very much. I bought myself a single ticket to the end of Southend Pier because I don't plan on coming back. And I'm not going to jump off the end either. Waiting for me a mile away, at the end of the longest pier in the world, is a plucky little lady called Clusette. Together, she and I are going to travel the coast of East Anglia. I hope she hasn't left without me. Here she is, all 18 foot of her. This is Clusette, and she may be no cruise liner, but I reckon she'll get me there. But where are we going? Well, with luck, all the way from Southend Pier round the bulge of East Anglia to King's Lynn. I'll do it in hops, of course, but that's the best way to do it if you want to get the full flavour of the rivers, the creeks, towns and resorts. Clusette may not be big, but she's strong, the sort of boat that looks after you. But when you cast off, you can never be 100% certain where you'll end up. This week, I'm hoping for a dawn encounter with an oyster fisherman. We've got a modelling assignment for a glossy calendar, well, Clusette has, and there's an island paradise up for sale. We're setting sail into a choppy sea, looking forward to all those things. But first, Foulness Island, to try and find the back door into the Essex rivers through a narrow creek crossed by the Havengore Bridge. It's shallow here and littered with sandbanks, and the weather's getting no better, and the sails are in a tangle, and just ahead, a great lump of sand someone dumped out here and just left. Land ahoy, as they say. Not quite where you'd expect to find land, right out in the middle of the Thames Estuary, but there it is, a small island of sand and shingle. And the reason it's there now is because they planned to build London's third airport here, and judging by this rather uncomfortable lumpy state of the sea, I reckon this is where baggage handling was going to be. Anyway, the engineers, they put that lump of shingle there to test what would happen to the foundations of the airport, and there it has remained. Foulness dead ahead now, and it's engine on, because this is where you navigate with care. Not only is it shallow and tidal, but until they open the bridge for me, I'm stuck out at sea. This is Clusette, over.
Go ahead, this is Shoebridge.
Clusette, we're to seaward of you, and we'd like to come through. I'm just looking and wonder if we're very short-masted, whether we can get through without the bridge moving, over.
No, I think I shall lift it for you, over.
Thanks very much indeed, we're coming towards you now. That's the back door opening, the shortcut from the Thames to the East Anglian rivers, from the roll of the open sea to the peace of the muddy creeks. Shoebridge, this is Clusette, thanks very much. This all belongs to the Ministry of Defence, bought in 1923 and still used to test guns and ammunition. You don't sail here without permission, unless you want your sails used for target practice. You know, we came through that bridge at incredible speed, carried by the tide that slews us through here. And I have to say, to be here I breathed a sigh of relief, because it was getting very choppy out there, and here it is as flat as a mill pond. Welcome to the River Roach. And it's where I'm to meet a man who knows these waters, the run of the tide, the shifting of the banks, better than most. It's time to hitch a ride on something a little drier, a bit more powerful than Clusette, and meet Trevor Taylor to find out more about what is, and this may surprise you, the least populated corner of England. Well, the wind's got up. It's quite fresh, isn't it, Trevor?
Yeah, it's 22 knots on the machine.
And I'm very pleased to be on your boat rather than mine, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for the trip.
That's a pleasure.
It is an amazing place. I feel like as I've landed on the moon. It's not like anything I've seen before. It's so remote, it's unbelievable.
Oh, you don't get many people come up here at all. I mean, I don't know why. I used to years ago, 30 or so years ago when I started up here, you'd get quite a few yachts, but now we can do a bird watching trip for an hour around the island and not see one boat on a Saturday evening, which is quite amazing, really. If you look over there, you can see Southend High Street, and the VAT building is the tall one. We won't mention that one though, but come round there.
That's the VAT building.
Yeah.
This feels a million miles away from the world of VAT, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And there's a huge chimney
Yeah,
over there.
that's over the other side of the Thames Estuary, up at Port Victoria at the grain oil refinery. That's about 11 miles away from us now. It doesn't look like it, does it? But it is. Yeah.
It's quite astonishing to be so close to the hustle and bustle of Southend.
Oh yeah, we're so far away.
What's interesting about this is that it looks at the moment like one vast lake. You think you could go anywhere, but come back in 4 or 5 hours' time, it look rather different.
Oh, you're dead right. I mean, in about half an hour, these weeds that you see sticking up here won't be. There'll be just one mass of water, and many a boat's got stuck on the top of there. Pulled plenty off myself. Yeah.
So at high water, everything disappears.
Yeah, it's dangerous. Yeah,
and then at low water, what's left?
Nothing. You can walk it because the mud's too soft, but I mean, there's nothing. There's nothing at all.
There's no point coming to these waters if you don't like mud. There's plenty of it. Try it at the crack of dawn if you want to see it at its best. When it's low water, that's when you'll come across Hilary Barrett. He's now the only oyster fisherman at work in these waters. It's the loneliest of jobs. One thing you do learn when you're sailing this coast is that tide and time waits for no man. It's, well, just after 7 in the morning coming up to low water, which means that Clouzet is going nowhere, but it does mean that Hilary Barrett can start his day's work. And the reason we're here, of course, is because Hilary farms oysters, and this is a traditional thing to do here, isn't it? It's gone on for, what, centuries?
Has done. There's been a big lapse in the last 20 years probably, yeah, and then it's started again about 10 years, 12 years ago in this area.
This is an incredible landscape. It's a mudscape, really, isn't it? I mean, it's very difficult in this light, particularly, to see where the water ends and the mud begins. This could be a very spooky place, couldn't it?
I've been on the mud a couple of times.
Oh, do we get off again?
Yeah.
We're motoring slowly up Agglesham Pool. The very last of the tide is ebbing away, and his precious crop of oysters is fast emerging. I sense we run out of water. It feels very shallow. How deep is it?
1 foot.
Yeah, do you often have to get out and push?
A lot of the time, yeah.
Anyone who stood on the shore and looking at it say, oh, his engine's broken down.
You pass those gloves there, Paul? Yeah, these need turning, just so they don't grow into each other and keep themselves nice and round. And they're basically a rock oyster, so they will actually grow together, you know, if you don't keep them moving. And they also get silted up with all the mud that sits on them. So once a month we turn them, give them a bit of a shake.
These aren't the same type of oyster that the Romans would have brought here, are they?
No, these are Ostrogigas, they're commonly known as Pacific oyster.
Pacific oyster?
Yeah, they're similar to the Portuguese in appearance. They're a cup oyster rather than a flat oyster.
And how does something that's come from the Pacific get on in the cold waters of Essex?
Better than native oyster does, really, and they're hardier than native oyster. They can take longer out of the water and colder weather, up to now that's what we found anyway. And they grow much faster than the native oyster, 3 years as opposed to 5 years.
How many oysters have you got in this river?
I put down about 250,000 a year each year. And I suppose in here now there's about, in the region of about 30, 40, 50,000, something like that. And the rest are out in the Roach.
So you could have,
years.
what, up to sort of a million oysters every year?
Well, getting on towards 750 million, yeah.
And you know every one of them, do you? Every oyster turned by hand?
Intimately. Handled each one.
It does feel like the end of the earth. As a stranger to these parts who's just sailed in, it's not like anywhere I've been before.
Yeah, you feel, that's why I like it, really. I mean, it's just very, solitary down here. I mean, you're not far from anywhere. You can hear everything going on. You hear the trains going into the station in Burnham, and yet it's so peaceful and sort of tranquil down here in this sort of time of the year. Well, even in the winter, it's nice. Quite honestly, I mean, it's different, and the wildlife is different during the winter to the summer, but it's still pleasant. The 4 seasons.
And then, just as we thought we were alone, a figure appeared. A visitor from another planet? An oyster thief? Actually, a health inspector on an unannounced visit. Seriously, he checks the oysters once a month, which is reassuring, because I suspect breakfast may be next. You know, I think this could be the best bit of oyster farming, isn't it? When you get to eat them. Or perhaps you don't like oysters after all this.
I love oysters.
That's a good job, isn't it? Don't oysters come male and female?
No. They're male and change to female for the breeding season and change back to male again.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Very versatile, isn't it? Very convenient.
Yeah.
What's the best way to eat these?
Chew them.
Chew them?
Yeah.
Lovely early breakfast. And the oysters, you know, I know they've had the all clear from the environmental health, but they are safe to eat, aren't they?
Oh, yeah.
You enjoying me? Cheers. And here's to good oyster farming.
Delicious.
Mouthful of seawater, I ain't call it.
The flavour will come in a minute.
You're right, you know, the saltiness is all gone. It's great to be under sail again, in the sunshine, leaving the muddy River Roach behind. Cluzette and I heading for the Crouch. At least, I think it's the Crouch.
You know, if you weren't certain of your navigation, if you hadn't read the chart, you might not have a clue where you were, because all these rivers do look very similar. There's a sort of sea wall, they've all got one of those, and there's a lot of mud, and there's the water itself. And honestly, you could be anywhere, except I'm reasonably convinced this is the River Crouch, because there ahead, the lovely little town of Burnham-on-Crouch.
And nowhere prettier on this entire river. This place, even the back streets, are pickled in maritime history. I guess these were fishermen's cottages once. It might be a yachting centre now, but Henry Potton, who's a local historian, knows what it would have looked like a century ago.
There would have been more shipping here, plenty of sailing barges. The beginnings of the yacht business, the oyster trade was beginning to die down for natural causes, really. Large yachts were arriving with paid crews from the local fishermen and so on, and the boat yards were beginning to service yachts and produce yachts as well. It was partly fueled by the railways. It was convenient to come down from the weekend from the city, and they were mostly city financiers of one kind or another. Or
Quite wealthy?
Quite wealthy, yes. They could afford to pay crews to man their boats, up to the level of the skipper as well. And the crews were equipped with uniforms, of course, quite well treated.
Were they?
Yes, they were, yes.
And those lovely sailing hats with the white tops, I suppose?
No, not many of them wore hats, but when you look at old photographs, they've all got jerseys with the name of their yacht on.
These in many ways were the grandest days of Burnham-on-Crouch,
they were,
weren't
yes.
they?
Gradually it became more democratised, partly as sailing clubs moved here. With the foundation of yacht clubs, more and more people began to take part in sailing, and it did become democratised, so that the yacht clubs, for instance, sponsored their own class boats, which one of their requirements was it had to be built to a certain quite low price.
What happened to Burnham during the Second World War? Presumably the pleasure boating came to a stop.
Yes, it did, and the yachts were laid up. Many of the yachtsmen joined the RNVR, and this became something of a naval base. It was a closed area. The naval base was based on, it was HMS Sir Matthew, and based on the headquarters were at the Royal Corinthian Yacht Club. And there was a lot of training went on for landing craft crews conducted by the Royal Marines.
So it was a busy place?
A very busy place, yes, yes. And of course, there was, while there was an invasion scare, this was reckoned to be a prime target.
Paul, give us a smile.
And now I'm a target of Den Phillips' camera. Den is a professional photographer, and her models are usually the hefty, traditional craft of the Essex waters. You'll find her following the stately sailing barges out of Malden or the racing smacks out of West Mersey. Today, she's pointing her camera at smaller fry.
But I didn't sail until I was in my teens, and I soon discovered that all the handsome, most interesting men were working and sailing around the waterfront. So I quickly got hold of a boyfriend, and then soon after discovered that, to my joy, that the boats were beautiful as well.
So can you find beauty in a small boat as well as a large one?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a 16-foot dinghy. I love small boats and big boats. I mean, all boats have some charm to me.
These big ones, though, isn't it? Like the Thames barges behind us. I mean, they're the ones that really speak to you, don't they?
Yeah, they're majestic. That's the expression that people use always about barges. Yes, they are gorgeous with all the rigging, and they're very photogenic, you know. Ooh, lovely shot. I think how lucky I am when I'm out on the river photographing these beautiful boats and people saying, "Oh, you are working." Yeah, I'm working. Not bad, eh? Excellent, that's great. Steady. Fabulous.
How many times do you think you photographed a Thames barge? Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands?
I'd say tens of thousands, and I never tire of it because there's always something different going on, different people on board, different venues, different rivers, and they're just beautiful vessels.
Some of your best pictures, in my opinion anyway, some of the really powerful ones are in black and white. Why do you choose black and white?
Well, I think black and white definitely lends itself to my subject, which is classic and traditional boats and riverscapes and seascapes, because I think it's a lot more artistic.
There's something about a black and white photograph which is slightly out of time, as indeed these ships are.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, everybody can take snaps, and there are not many people doing traditional and classic boats in black and white. So I've found a little niche market here.
Talking of snaps, why is it that when, you know, when I go taking photographs of boats, they end up like rather miserable photographs of boats, but when you do it, they're works of art? What is the secret, please?
Well, it's sweet that you say they're works of art, but I think it's, I don't want to sound immodest, but I think that in every good photographer, it's in the eye. I mean, everybody can go out and take snaps. People generally are afraid to move right in to a subject, which I think is very important as well. So I'm not interested just in getting portrait shots of a whole boat. I want to get in there, you know, get the bow shots, the people shots, different aspects and angles.
I'm dying to see the ones you've taken of Cluzette.
Yes.
I hope she looks all right.
Yes, she looked great. Actually, the wind picked up as we went further downriver, didn't it?
Oh, well, she may make it to a calendar one day.
Oh, you never know. Well, we'll try and get that one organised.
I think if you said to most people, what's the big dream, you know, the really big one, they might say, to sail away to an island paradise, an island that is all my own. Well, I found an island paradise. It's in the middle of the River Blackwater here in Essex, and it's called Osea Island, and to the man who lives here, it is a real paradise. But rather temptingly, it's up for sale. The price tag, I have to tell you, is £6 million, but worth a look, don't you think?
Who'd believe it? Only 50 miles from London. And a big island too, 330 acres of it. And on the waterfront, the Manor House, where David Cole has lived for the past 15 years.
On a day like today, anyone who lands here must think they've dropped into heaven, don't they?
I think so, and I think they have really. In this sort of weather, it's absolutely wonderful.
Yes, but to every up of island life, there's a down, isn't there? I mean, what is island life really like? It's a lot of people's dream, isn't it, to live on an island? But what's it really like?
Well, I think living here is quite difficult. I personally love it, but of course it does have disadvantages. You sometimes have to stay off the island longer than you want. Other times you can't get on when you want to.
Because you are actually connected to the land, but only at certain states of tide, is that right?
Yes, that's right. Because we've got a causeway road, which is open for 4 hours every 12. And that means, basically, means 1 week it might be morning and evening. So you go ashore at breakfast time and supper time, and then, or you can go for the whole day. The following week it'll be midday and midnight. So you can go ashore for 4 hours and have lunch or do what you want.
And you've got to be very careful, presumably, because if you go out, you've got to get back, and if you miss the tide, you're off for 12 hours.
You are, after a long time.
How often does that happen?
Well, it's only happened to me twice in 32 years, so it's not too bad. I think if you live here, like as we do, and have done for the last 15 years or so, you've got the rhythm of the tides in your mind, and it works.
Apart from the occasional aeroplane, which you get everywhere, don't you, these days, there's no traffic noise, is there? It is absolutely quiet.
None.
Apart from the birds.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, terribly intrusive noise of the cuckoo. We just heard the 2 oyster catchers flying around us.
So if the noisiest thing are the cuckoos and the oyster catchers, life's not too bad, is it?
O.C. Island was taken over by the Navy in the war. It became an important research and training base. You can hardly recognise the house when it was surrounded by military buildings and huts. There's a strong streak of eccentricity running through some of O.C. Island's previous owners. The house, for example, was built in 1900 by Frederick Charrington of the brewing family. He intended it as a home for recovering alcoholics. Then, after the war, it was bought by another unusual character.
The last owner was William Allnat, who was extremely eccentric. He built up a large property company, and he was a bit of a sadist. He used to make all his senior executives come here and then do sort of, they all had dress as school children, and they had to compete in general knowledge tests and on little benches and things. This was in their 60s, men in their 60s and 70s, and women. So when he died, his executives couldn't wait to get rid of it.
This proves what a finely calculated business it has to be living on O.C. Island. This car is having no trouble driving from the island to the shore along the causeway because the tide is low. But if you were to try it in 2 or 3 hours' time, the water would be up to here, and O.C. Island would be a true island once again.
Well, next week I sail northwards to listen to nightingales alongside the River Colne, to relive the children's stories of Arthur Ransom. And we're going to pretend Clouzet is a 20,000 tonner bound for Europe's biggest container port.